The age of Republicans is over. Right now, internal fights are brewing, erupting, as the McConnell-led faction of the Republican Party is freaking out at the Trump-led faction of the Republican Party, angry at losing both Georgia Senate seats. Now, this is truly incredible with 98% reporting. Warnock has defeated Loeffler and Ossoff very likely to defeat Perdue. That is both Democrats winning. The Senate will go 50-50 with Kamala Harris, the vice president and president of the Senate, as the tie-breaking vote, giving Democrats a simple majority. Now, you do have people like Manchin who may not allow Democrats to just do anything. So there may be some pullback. It won't be absolute that Democrats just go nuts and burn everything to the ground. They may not actually be able to pack the Supreme Courts because of the likes of Manchin, but we will see. With a 50-50 split, they're going to be able to just push through whatever they want. Kamala Harris coming in and breaking that tie. I think Republicans are screwed. I think they've been screwed for a long time. You see, Donald Trump is a moderate. Vox.com, progressive website, called Donald Trump a moderate. It's really funny because then after he wins, everybody says he's a far right, white nationalist and all this other nonsense about the president, but he's fairly moderate. Here's what's going to happen. Democrats keep winning for a variety of reasons. They change the rules for a variety of reasons, but mostly to help them win. Every day, more and more low information voters are brought into the fold by Democrats, and that puts Republicans at a major disadvantage. Republicans have low information voters. That's a fact. Democrats do as well, but Democrats rely on them for victories, and it works. So long as they control cultural institutions, they will win over low information voters. So what this means is, and just for those that don't know the context when I bring it up, as I've brought it up in other segments, trying to get 16-year-olds to vote, come on, they're not going to be able to tell you sound fiscal policy and vote for someone who's talking about the proper way to deal with the deficit or the debt. They don't know. And even AOC has advocated for deficit spending. Great. Here comes the hyperinflation. Now, the progressives lined up behind the Democratic establishment for the most part. Some progressives in the media space didn't, but, well, there you go. So long as they're lining up and getting on the, bending the knee for Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats are going to have an easier path forward. Now, here's what's happening with Republicans. This is going to get funny. Mitch McConnell rejected $2,000 stimulus. Donald Trump called for it. Just before an election, everybody was saying it. They were like, probably the stupidest thing any Republican could have done. Actually, let me show you this tweet from Robbie Starbuck. He says, Mitch McConnell not getting $2,000 checks sent out was the worst political decision in recent memory. It was a layup. It told people who would have voted for our candidates that you don't care about them. It told people that you don't care about them. There's nothing worse than telling voters you don't care about them. You know what the best part in all of this is? The Democrats' strategy paid off. They beat the living crap out of the working class, laughed and screamed and yelled. And what I mean by laughed is you got, as I often mention, Lori Lightfoot, Whitmer, you've got Newsom. They go out in defiance of COVID lockdown. Nancy Pelosi defies COVID lockdown. They are laughing in your face as your businesses are shut down and your jobs are gone. But it doesn't matter. Low information voters in big cities don't care. You come out and you say, there's a virus. Okay, it's a pandemic and we have to lock down. I'm sorry, but your job is just not important enough. And they go, you're right. We got to do the right thing. And then Newsom kicks his feet up, goes to a restaurant, ignoring all the lockdowns and doing whatever he wants. I have to wonder why it is the Democrats aren't particularly scared of this, right? They even had a Democrat who tested positive for COVID show up for the swearing in for the rules ceremony, the swearing in session of Congress on the 3rd, to vote for Nancy Pelosi because they were worried about losing power. You see, the Democrats love playing dirty games. Now, don't get me wrong, Republicans do too, but they're just not organized. That's the thing. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, I say, I'm not a fan of either of these individuals. And for the most part, not most of the Republican Party either. But you know what? I think these Republicans deserved to lose. Absolutely. They deserve to. Not that it's good for the country. It's actually really bad. There was hope in the stock market that a Republican-controlled Senate with a Democrat House and Democrat presidency would be good for this country because it would stall everything out. it would create some kind of stability. That's gone. Now we're going to see lunacy from the Democrats. They're going to push rule changes. It is going to be a whole lot of hilarious everything, I guess. Donald Trump signed that executive order banning critical race theory, basically saying follow the Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You can't discriminate on the basis of race. Well, Joe Biden's pledged to get rid of that. Joe Biden has pledged to ban online sale of firearms, accessories, and ammunition. Now, listen. You can't send weapons and ammo from online orders to states that prohibit it. Well, here we go. Gun control is going to ramp up like crazy, which is fascinating to me because we have, 7 million new gun owners in this past year. I love these people who went out and bought guns and ammo scared about the unrest and then voted for the Democrats. It's like, imagine going to the store, saving up money, and then being like, I'm going to buy this expensive thing right now. I'm going to buy a PS5. You buy it, you go home, and then you hand it to your neighbor and say, great, now I feel good. You bought it. Then you voted for the guy who's going to take it away from you. These people, they don't understand. That's why I say the Democrats rely on low information voters. Of course, Trump supporters are already screaming voter fraud. They don't think it's legit. Perhaps, but there's two factors I will say. When you scream voter fraud, and this was everybody warned this. Let me tell you the three big factors that I think impacted this race. First, man, I should have trusted my gut. I had been saying all along that I thought the Democrats were going to win because Trump wasn't on the ballot. But in the last week, I did a segment on my main channel where I said the Republicans are set to win. Why? Because I didn't think my personal opinion on projecting outcomes was worth anything, considering the polls were favorable for the Republicans. It at least showed that Perdue was going to win, and that meant the Republicans would control the Senate. And I should have just recognized I was right the first time. But let me tell you the three things. First of all, they said that they've been warning for some time. If you tell people the election is fraudulent, why would they want to vote? In fact, some voters were asking Loeffler, why should I vote if it's rigged? And then they had this really pathetic answer. Well, if they're going to cheat, it's our job to make it hard for them to cheat. Are you kidding me? That's not confidence building. So that hurt. Then you had the stimulus checks. Mitch McConnell was like, I'm going to make sure nobody gets the help that the president wants them to get. Congratulations. You played yourself. What were you thinking doing that just before an election? Quite literally offering people money in exchange for votes. You think the Republicans are going to win after Democrats were doing that? Trump tried. They're blaming Trump for this. Trump's the one who was like, I'm going to get you $2,000. It was a layup, like Robbie Starbucks. It was a layup. And Mitch McConnell was like, no, I'm not interested in playing. Oh, they scored on me. Oh, no. There you go. Turtle man, you'll lose everything. Third, I don't think this last one is the biggest driver, but it's really interesting to see. I tweeted, I wonder how many Trump supporters are going to be leaving on the 5th to head to D.C. to support Trump instead of sticking around for the runoff election. Interestingly, a lot of people who don't get this said, but Tim, there's early voting. Look at the numbers. Early voting is like 80% Democrat. That means even if those Republicans voted early, the likelihood that when those votes come in favoring Republicans is it's slim. And Biden will just, the Democrats would just keep growing in terms of their lead. Trump supporters do not vote early or by absentee for the most part. There was a map that came out that said, here's what the country would look like if you only counted in-person voting, and it was 50 Republican states, all red. They said, here's what happens if you only count early and absentee, and it was almost entirely Democrat. So don't tell me when I say, Republicans are going to leave to D.C. that they all voted early. No, they didn't. Now, the bigger question is, how many people actually went from Georgia to D.C.? Was it 20,000 people? I mean, that would be substantial, and I really don't think so. I think the biggest factor is Mitch McConnell is feckless, and he's not going to even support the president. He has called on people not to support the president, and he blocked a stimulus check of $2,000 for you. So most people are probably saying, I don't care if this guy is Senate Majority Leader or not. What's the point? They lost faith. They just didn't care. It's interesting, though. It's really fascinating to see how across the country Republicans did really well in the House and state legislatures, but then lost the most crucial elections are the ones they lost. The Democrats didn't need to win all that much in the House. They just needed to maintain their majority, and so they lost quite a bit. They lost quite a bit in the state houses as well. But then in key cities, it was just enough for Joe Biden to get the presidency. And in Georgia, the one state where it needed to happen, it's really weird. I'll tell you, man. It's what's fascinating is that Perdue was leading, I think, by a substantial amount of votes on election day, but he didn't crack 50%. The left was saying that the runoff election system was racist and it should be abolished or whatever. I'm like, okay, then Perdue wins. The Republicans only needed one seat to win, and they couldn't even do that. I do the clap thing, right? Clap, clap, clap. Let me tell you what happens next. This is from the Washington Post. They say, how many times has this happened in U.S. history? Only 3. In 1881, the Senate remained evenly divided for much of its 2-year session. In 54, it happened again because of a senator's death. But the even split lasted only a few months. In 2001, the Senate was split 50-50 from January until June. Who runs the Senate if no party has a majority? The party that holds the vice presidency. The Constitution makes the vice president the president of the Senate with the power to cast a decisive vote in the case of a tie. In 2001, for instance, Democrats had control at the outset during the few days when Al Gore was vice president. Then, when Richard B. Cheney became vice president, Republicans took control. This year, a 50-50 split would give control to the Democrats, with Kamala Harris able to cast the deciding vote. What about the party that doesn't control the vice presidency? Is it shut out? They say twice, in 1881 and 2001, the two parties have struck deals that allowed for some sharing of power. That left the out-of-power party with some leverage that a minority party typically has. In 2001, for instance, the parties agreed to split committee memberships evenly instead of overloading them with the members of the majority party as usual. They also changed the rules so that if a committee deadlocked on a bill, the bill could still be brought to a floor vote on the Senate. Trent Lott of Mississippi, then the Senate's top Republican, worked out that deal with then Democratic leader Tom Daschle. In an interview Tuesday, Lott said he wanted to avoid gridlock by giving Democrats greater influence. I could have been a horse's rear and said, we have the majority, to hell with you. And we would have had daily warfare. They said, could that compromise happen in 2021? It's possible. Neither Republicans nor Democrats have offered much detail about how they would handle a split. Several of the staffers who helped Daschle and Lott hammer out their power sharing agreement are still working for the leaders in the current Senate, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer. Before the 2016 election, when there was a chance of another 50-50 split, McConnell told reporters he would seek to use the 2001 agreement as a model. They say if the Democrats have 51 votes, what could they pass? With 51 votes, Democrats could confirm Biden's nominees for cabinet positions, federal judgeships, and if one came open, a seat for the U.S. Supreme Court. They could also use the legislative mechanism known as reconciliation to pass some legislation if it is related to budgets and spending. They're going to be able to basically jack up taxes, things like that. The Senate could theoretically change the rule setting that 60 vote threshold, but that sort of change seems unlikely. So I'll tell you, I think Democrats are going to taxes are going to go way up. And the issue I take with Democrats and taxation is that the way they structure it is so that the rich stay rich and those who are poor or middle class or upper class can't break into the absolute upper echelon. I think upward mobility is important. But what Democrat policies consistently do is create a two-tiered system of lordship and serfs, essentially. When I'll give you a simple breakdown. If you say we're going to increase the highest tax bracket to 55% or something like that, right? People who make over, I think it's probably like 300 and something thousand. Let's just say if you make $500,000 a year, you're pretty rich. Like you're really well off, and you can just basically do, for the most part, whatever you want. But $500,000 isn't all that much, especially if you have a family, relative to the ultra elites, the CEOs, the moguls, the billionaires, the millionaires, etc. So here's what happens. If you make $500,000 and you get taxed more than half and you walk away with $200,000 spending, you're doing all right. You got $200,000. You buy yourself a Tesla. You can pay off. You got nothing to worry about for your house. You can afford a really, really big house. You're doing great. Now, if you are getting taxed at 55%, but your salary as a CEO is $20 million, then you walk away with, 9 or so million in cash. With that excess money in the millions, You can invest in a lot of things that allow you to grow your wealth. So what I'm trying to say is what we would need is an expanding progressive bracket where we say it's not about taxing everyone above 500K at 55. It's about saying, okay, if you make $500,000, you get taxed at 40. If you make $1 million, you get taxed at 43. So we need to increase the amount of progressive brackets. That's actually something Bernie Sanders has proposed, and I very much agree with it because I don't like the idea of lordships ruling over the serfs. My bigger problem with it, however, the challenge is I don't think giving the money to the government just solves the problem. So there are some serious issues. This is the issue I take with Democrats right now. What they're going to do is they're going to say, we're going to increase the taxes on the 1%. And the top 1%. Well, that includes people who make like what? What's top 1%? Like $350K a year? I mean, a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But you can't compare that to Nancy Pelosi's net worth, which is in the hundreds of millions. So by all means, tax the wealthy. But the way they're doing it makes it so that the people who are trying to break into the upper echelon, the top 1%, the 0.1%, it becomes increasingly difficult. But for those that are already there, it's exponentially easier to just stay there. So I think we'll see a lot of that. But let me tell you what's going to happen with these Republicans. Here's where it gets fun. Republicans turn on Trump after Georgia loss. Fissures are forming as Republicans decide whether it's useful to cling to Trump, even as he tries to subvert an election or to distance themselves. You see, they lost, in my opinion, primarily because they rejected Trump. People love Trump. The Republican Party loves Trump. The Republican politicians, the establishment morons, were like, I don't like Trump. Mitch McConnell coming out and saying, don't support the president in the Electoral College vote count. That was stupid. Mitch McConnell coming out and blocking the $2,000 stimulus. That was stupid. Now, to be fair, McConnell said, you're not going to bully us into this. We'll do $2,000 if you repeal 230, essentially obstructing it. And Trump was like, just do it. How are they mad at Trump when they're the ones who lost? Trump didn't lose Georgia. Trump tried to help you win Georgia. You lost Georgia because you're terrible at what you do. Let's be real, man. Look at someone like me. I am absolutely the best opportunity for these Republicans because I didn't vote in 2012. I voted in I didn't vote in 2012. I voted in 2008 in the presidential race for Barack Obama. Regretted it later. In 2016, I did not vote. And then in 2020, I came around because I was like, Trump is not the same as the system, and I'll take what I can get. I like that he's for school choice. I like that he opposes the critical race theory stuff. I like that he was trying to get our troops out of Afghanistan and Syria. Not that it's perfect, but I was like, I'll take it. I'll take it. And yeah, I voted Republican down ticket, mostly on the wokeness issue. They should have been speaking to people like me. The moderates they needed to win, but they weren't. There were some, I'll tell you, my opinion over the past weeks was I don't care about Loeffler and Perdue. They are just I don't care if Mitch McConnell retains the power. In fact, I don't like that he does. I don't like him. We need new politicians. We need new populists. We'll see if we actually get them. It's entirely possible somehow Perdue pulls ahead. I don't think so. Ossoff is up around, I think, 12 to 13,000 votes. And the remaining places to be counted, let me show you this. We got a map from the New York Times. The remaining areas where votes are at, it's basically blue areas in DeKalb County. They're waiting for votes to come in. And I mean, it's just absurd. Warnock has 89%. Atlanta area is not going to go to Perdue. Democrats are going to take it. And Republicans are too busy blaming Trump. Well, I'll tell you this. If I had a choice between some Lauren Boebert, okay? You guys know Lauren Boebert? She's the lady who went on TV and challenged Beto O'Rourke saying, you're not going to take my guns. Then she ran for Congress and she won. And I actually believe she's principled and has integrity and would stand up for what she thinks is right over careerist politicking. I look at someone like her and I look at, Loeffler and Perdue, and I'm just like, nah, sorry, I don't believe them at all. I do not believe these people are principled. And the problem may be it's easier to be a member of Congress than it is to be a senator because senators got to play to the whole state. And, for Congress, you have your district. So it's easier to represent your district than it is an entire state. No principles. I mean, the same is true for Chuck Schumer and Pelosi. We need to get rid of these career politicians, but Where we're headed, I don't think Republicans are going to win for a long time. If they do, it's going to be like, some Republicans going to come out and be like, I'm for mass migration and I'm for raising taxes. I am for, universal basic income, but I'm a Republican. And that'll be it. And then the Republican Party is going to be dragged further to the left. And it's funny because the left says that the Overton window, these leftists are like, the Overton window has shifted so far to the right. And that really comes from like young people. I hear that mostly from people who are in their early 20s who have no political experience, who think the Overton window shifted to the right, when in fact it's shifted ridiculously to the left. Case in point, they'll ban Milo for making jokes, and they won't ban people on the left for similar things. Or Antifa. So like the best example, when I was on the podcast with Jack Dorsey and Vijay Gadde, Joe Rogan podcast, I pointed out there was an Antifa account, a aligned leftist account, calling for violence and instructing people to do so, and they didn't remove it. And then you get Milo making a naughty joke and they ban him outright. The Overton window has shifted so far to the left, they don't even realize what's going on. But the scary thing is they think the Overton window's on the right. That's how far left they are. That's going to be crazy. Let me show you some more tweets. Josh Kroshnar is tweeting about Mitch McConnell. He is a columnist, a journalist for the at the National Journal. He says, emotions running high among McConnell-aligned Republicans early Wednesday a.m. after reality of what transpired in Georgia settled in. May be the heat of the moment, but mood is for declaring war on Team Trump. Want to marginalize Trump as they marginalized Steve Bannon in 2017. Do you think you're going to convince Democrat voters to vote Republican by going against Trump? That to me is insane. I guess maybe. But it's not even about Trump himself. It's about Trump policies. It's about populism on the right. Well, it's all you do what you guys want. And far be it from me to argue because I just don't care. Look, Trump had his chance. Trump's flailing. Trump's now saying if Pence comes through for us, Pence is not going to come through for anybody. I'm sick of. Look, I get it. There are a lot of Trump supporters who are trying to keep morale up. They don't want to back down because the reality is actually rather scary that Democrats are now going to control basically everything. They don't want to accept it. But come on. Trump has fumbled over and over and over again. And they say Trump, tired of winning and all that stuff. No, Trump has been fumbling the ball since before the election and now after it. That's just the reality. The lawsuit should have come in beforehand. They didn't. Well, here we are. So what's going to happen next, man? Democrats are going to go in and they're going to dance around and they're going to pass crazy things. It's going to get bad. Taxes are going to go up. Money printing is going to go insane. It's going to decimate the economy. There's CNBC ran a story where they interviewed a bunch of financial advisors and they said that, 2/3 believe the markets are going to be hit pretty hard. And the market was doing well because of the stability that was approaching, that the Senate was going to be Republican. Now that Democrats have everything, there's going to be rampant changes, no stability. People are going to get out of the dollar. Dollars are being printed like crazy. And in printing, what I mean is typed on a keyboard and pressed enter because they don't do paper money for the most part. It's all digital now. Hyperinflation's underway. Mass internal migrations in the United States are all over the place. People are going to flee cities. The shape of this country is changing dramatically, and it's moving further and further left. Now, I'll tell you something. I'm not super concerned about social welfare policy. I'm not. And the reason for it is I support it to a certain degree. My problem is the bloat and the corruption. I think we can have a sound social welfare policies, but you have to set up a system by which you can purge them when they break and when they become bloated and they're festering. My bigger issue is that the left has embraced the cult of wokeness, this racist ideology that's actually creating more segregation. That's going to be the scariest thing. When you are not allowed to have freedoms or liberties or access based on your race. And I know the left is saying, the white people are scared of losing power. I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about every race. Every race. You do not want to be in a situation where a vaccine is being distributed and they say, based on your race, you don't get it. That is nightmarish. That's where we're going. Because they want equality for all. We'll see how it plays out. Right now, Trump supporters are flocking en masse to Washington, D.C. Looks pretty peaceful, and there's a lot of people. And the more people there are, the more peaceful it becomes. They're going to be counting the electoral votes today. It'll be fun and exciting. I wonder how Trump supporters in D.C. will react. for the most part, it's a bunch of seemingly middle-aged Trump supporters who are walking around and having a good time. So I can't imagine anything really happens. This could, in my opinion, be the end of the, I feel like the U.S. is fundamentally broken as it is, and it's being reformed into something that is not the United States as we've known it. And that's true. It's happened a lot, right? The Civil War changed things. Then we had the Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve. Then we had world wars. So the country's shape has changed dramatically in several different ways. But my fear now is the one thing that defines, in my opinion, whether or not there's political power behind a movement is organization. Trump supporters have that organizational power to a certain degree, but it's not enough. But it's not enough to change the political system in the system, but it's certainly enough to disrupt it in worrying ways. So we'll see how it plays out. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.